When Heiner was talking, not Heiner, when Wayne was talking yesterday about the guru-disciple relationship, I was reminded of a joke. The joke is this: a millionaire somehow became a spiritual seeker. So he called up some Swami's name that was suggested to him. And he called and said, "Swami, I am a millionaire. Now I've turned my attention to spiritual seeking. And I'm told that my greatest obstacle is my attachment to money. What should I do?" He said, "Just don't do anything. Wait until I come and see you." And then a friend of mine, he told me that perhaps the best known or maybe the other way around, ashram and guru in India for the last 25 years, a friend of mine connected with that ashram told me that he had given in all a donation of $1 million short of $25,000. And then he got so disgusted, he left the ashram and left everything to do with him. So this happens also. Where my guru Nisargadatta Maharaj was concerned, he had a very simple formula about cash donations and gifts, which I too follow. And the formula is, I expect nothing, I demand nothing, I refuse nothing. About Nisargadatta Maharaj, let me give you an incident, most interesting. One morning, a Brahmin priest came to see him among the visitors. He sat there, just a lungi, that piece of cloth covering his, and then a piece of, this, like the South Indian typical way of doing, some kind of a shirt, and a towel over the shoulders. And his story was that he came from Tiruvannamalai, that is, from Ramana Maharshi's place. He didn't have any money. So he went to the station and got on the platform. As soon as the train which was going towards Bombay arrived, he got into the train. Then after a while, when the ticket collector found that he had no ticket, he was thrown off the train. So he sat on that platform until the next train arrived. And this way it had taken him about 48 hours. You see? So, and in the meantime, whenever somebody gave him something he was a Brahmin priest, which could be seen. So there have always been people in India who, seeing a Brahmin priest, offer him a meal. So that's how he got his meals. And he said, so Maharaj asked him, Maharaj was concerned. He said, "What arrangements have you made in Bombay?" I said, "None." He said, "None. I'm just here because I just couldn't wait to see you. I had that inspiration in Ramanashram that I had to go and see you." Immediately I started, and here I am after about 48 hours. So Maharaj, then, there were about, as usual, not many people, 8 or 10 people. Most of them were Indians. And he asked, "Surely one of you can accommodate him, give him a piece of spot anywhere in your house, 6 feet by 3 feet, where he can lie down." He said, "Of course." 2 or 3 people said, "Of course, sir." And then someone took him in and also fed him. And being a Brahmin priest, people around who were doing puja employed him to do their puja. And at the end of the month, he came to Maharaj and said, Maharaj, I'm leaving tomorrow. I can't tell you how happy I've been this month in Bombay and listening to your talks. Will you please accept a small gift from me, which I have earned during this month? And he presented Maharaj with one 10-rupee note. ₹10 note is even in Maharaj's style of living, was a small amount. So Maharaj accepted it with great dignity, as if he had 10 times or 100 times that amount. Put it as usual in his pocket, said, thank you very much. Then he said, when are you leaving tomorrow? He said, I'll come here. After the talk, I'll go. So Maharaj said, fine. So after he left, he sent his assistant, one of his attendants, and got a new set of clothes, South Indian clothes, for the Brahmin priest. And when he came the next morning, he formally presented the packet to him and added a 100-rupee note. He said, please accept this from me. It was such a wonderful gesture. It could bring tears to one's eyes. But that's the way it was. So I thought I would mention this. Now, last day, I think everybody will be waiting to get ready to go. So, any questions? Any questions? Any comments? Any suggestions? Will be welcome. And the question can relate to anything concerning this body-mind organism, personal or otherwise. And I will try to answer them in as straightforward a manner as possible. Last chance. Unless you are attending the third seminar.
Ramesh, you told us about the difference between observing and witnessing.
Yes.
What is the difference between witnessing and consciousness?
Witnessing and?
Consciousness.
Oh, consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is the screen on which this movie of life is being played. Consciousness is the screen. It is the basis of everything. You see? So in that consciousness, understanding of what is happens. And the understanding of what is, again I refer to Buddha's words, events happen, deeds are done, there is no individual doer thereof. And witnessing whatever happens is, what you are saying, is the witnessing the same as consciousness? That's your question?
Yeah.
Everything happens in consciousness, therefore witnessing happens in consciousness. Now, witnessing and observing, understanding in action is witnessing. When the understanding is not there, what happens is individual observing, in which there is an individual observing and judging. When the understanding is in action, then witnessing happens. And there is no individual witnesser to witness and judge. So it is the understanding in action which does the witnessing. And the understanding in action, there is no individual.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And with that state which you call for the sage, the non-witnessing state,
Yes.
is that the same as Ramana called the natural state?
Could be, yes. Yes, I think it is.
And if that state goes deeper and deeper, so external stimuli no longer are cut out. Is that what is traditionally called samadhi?
Yes. That is one word, yes. Samadhi or satori or whatever other names there may be, yes. But what Ramana Maharshi called the natural state, I have a feeling that that natural state includes both. Witnessing when there is something to be witnessed, and non-witnessing stage when there is nothing to be witnessed. Now, Ramana Maharshi himself, he used to lie down on his cot quietly, nothing happening. Occasionally someone would ask a question. By and large, people were quite happy to sit in his presence. So that state, in his case, would be non-witnessing. When someone asked a question and the answers were being given, an action was happening, and that was witnessed.
And there is one other thing that's a state which actually Wayne touched on it yesterday when he was talking, which a lot of poets talk about, which is like nothing. I mean, it can happen to people who are unenlightened or to people who are enlightened, maybe, I don't know. But for the unenlightened, it's the state suddenly, maybe when you're walking in nature, a beautiful view, and you are struck by it, and you just sort of go out of your body, you are just blown away by it. And that's what poets often write about. Blake called it the opening of the doors of perception.
Yes.
People get it on drugs. People get it through doing meditation.
Yes.
And that state has nothing to do with enlightenment. I used to think that was.
Those are only glimpses of the what is. I say they're free samples. Free samples to tempt you into seeking, going deeper. Free divine samples.
Thank you very much.
I want to clarify a concept. I was a few years teacher of transcendental meditation with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Yes.
And he had the concept of higher states of consciousness.
Yes.
And this concept was first the state of cosmic consciousness. And it all fits in also for me in the Advaita teaching. It was the realization of the subject. Of the self, the realization of the self on the subjective level. And then he calls God consciousness, the finest reality, and then unity consciousness, and then Brahman consciousness.
I see.
And could it be, because we spoke about other masters and so, and sometimes we spoke also on Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Yes.
And then he suddenly told us...
now wait a minute. Who said something? Maharshi said something about J. Krishnamurti?
Yes, yes.
And what was...
That he has gone too far in unity consciousness. And one needs to have a guru, a teacher, who can... give you like a Mahavakya, a great word, to bring you to the last day, to Brahman consciousness.
I see.
So Brahman consciousness means unity on a subjective and objective level, like witnessing all the time.
But what was the reference to J. Krishnamurti?
Yes, I don't understand this.
No, what was the reference to J. Krishnamurti? That he didn't have this full...
The full understanding.
He didn't?
He didn't.
I see. That means he didn't come to Maharshi Yogi.
That's right. They met each other in the plane. And Maharishi wants to have Krishnamurti for his work, and he said, I have other things to do.
Oh, he invited him?
Yes.
I see.
In a plane once it happened.
Oh, he invited J. Krishnamurti,
Yes.
and he said, what you are teaching is not my cup of
Right,
tea.
right. Yes.
Yes.
So could it be that someone, this is my question, can fall in the state of cosmic consciousness as the first awakening, and then, like in the case of Krishnamurti, goes directly in the state of unity consciousness, or in the case of Ramana Maharishi, goes directly into the last state, in the Brahman consciousness? Is that possible? And is it by...
You see, what happens is this. At what stage the seeking begins in any body-mind organism depends on the programming in that body-mind organism. That is the state of receptivity. Therefore, if I find 50 people listening to the talk, the receptivity, the level of receptivity is very different. You see, very different. So that depends where the seeking starts, and that depends on the programming of the body-mind organ, and that depends on the will of God. So the seeking can begin at any stage.
But also the realization could be on a different state, that somebody goes in...
So if somebody starts at a level where the receptivity is very high, then the seeking will last that much shorter. The misery will be that much less. You see?
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about something that Wayne mentioned yesterday when he said enlightenment is here.
I'm sorry?
He said yesterday,
Yes.
Enlightenment is here.
Yes.
And then he went on to say that when there's this body-mind instrument resonance between guru and disciple, I thought he said that it's actualized, it happens. Now, I think that that's not how I hear it, that's not how I understand it, that enlightenment is here. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you are, everywhere we are. And that it doesn't depend on any conditions to be realized or actualized, although we think it does. That's a concept. So, since it's already here, just like God is already here, and sometimes we know this and sometimes we don't, what are the necessary conditions then, except God's will, to bring it into existence? Or maybe there are no conditions.
Yes. Now, you see, as I said earlier, the truth or self-realization, or whatever you call it, is I am, the impersonal sense of existence. That means, in that impersonal sense of awareness, there is no sense of personal doership. So this truth, self-realization, I am, is hidden or covered by I am so-and-so. I am Ramesh, I am John, I am Jane, I am Linda. So that self-realization is always there. It is not something to be achieved. What needs is only the removal of the covering, removal of that which veils or hides or covers the I am. So self-realization is not something to be achieved, but something to be taken away. And that being taken away is exactly the ego that is created. That's why I said the process, my concept is they happened at the same time. Ego had to be created so that interpersonal human relationships had to happen, so that life as we know it could happen. So when God created the ego in every body-mind organism, He also started the process of removing the ego in a limited number of cases. So the process of creating the the covering by divine hypnosis and the removal of the hypnosis in a certain case started at the same time as part of the phenomenal functioning of manifestation of God's will. Started at the same time.
So then when Wayne was drinking and all, and you said that that was, the cover was being removed, that was his sadhana, even though he had no idea whatsoever that was the case.
That is correct.
So how did you come to see that? I mean, that's hard to understand.
I'm sorry?
How did you come to understand that was his personal sadhana, the drinking and the drugging?
I mean, that was the concept. Oh, make no mistake. That was a concept. The concept being, each person's sadhana, he may think he is doing the sadhana. But my standard concept is, no sadhana can happen unless that is precisely the sadhana that was supposed to happen. And it did happen, that all the sadhana that could be done was being done before the sudden event happened. So, whatever happened earlier, before the sudden event happened, I call it conceptually his sadhana. The word sadhana itself, therefore, is something which happens, which incidentally leads to the final event. So in his case, the only thing that was done was this alcohol and drugs. So I am not saying that is the process for everybody. Would have been great. In his case, that is what happened. In the case of Ramana Maharshi, no sadhana of any kind ever. In that body-mind organism, there was no need for sadhana at all. In fact, that body-mind organism, which was called Ramana Maharshi, was programmed with such total readiness to accept that just one experience was necessary. Just one experience.
My last question, I'm wondering if I went to see you privately and I told you some of the terrible things that have happened to me, difficult,
Yes.
Sufferings, that it's consoling to feel that you would tell me that was a sadhana. That really feels very right. But it doesn't somehow yet make any sense. I mean, it feels very good. But I can't make so much sense out of it.
Then I think you are laying too much importance on the concept of sadhana. You are laying too much importance on the concept of sadhana. If the understanding has to happen at a particular time, that is God's will in respect of that body-mind organism and the destiny. What happens prior to it presumably leads to it. So whether you call it sadhana or God's will or the destiny of the individual, it's immaterial. Therefore, sadhana is a concept. Sadhana is a concept. As I said earlier, everything is a concept.
Thank you.
Therefore, for someone who is used to hard discipline, as sadhana is told that someone's drinking habits and drug habits, whereas sadhana, it shakes you. I am doing such discipline for 20 years. And here is this man for 20 years drinking and drugging himself and gambling. Same thing? Yes. Conceptually, it's the same thing. So it is the word which, you see, it is the word, the sadhana, And two, more importantly, I have been doing the sadhana. You see? And what happened would almost certainly not have happened if Wayne had thought that was his sadhana. Yes.
Is it possible that the seeking stops without self-realization?
Can the seeking stop without there being self-realization?
You see, what is the ceasing of seeking? What do you mean, ceasing of seeking?
Mark, can you translate it?
Ceasing of seeking means the seeking stops. And what was the seeking about? Only when that which the seeking was happening for happens, then the seeking stops. You see? If I have my glasses up on my head and looking for glasses, when I realize it and bring the glasses down, the seeking has stopped. You see? So we call that, now this, seeking of glasses and finding the glasses and then the seeking stopping, basically it's the same thing. In this case you say, you are seeking enlightenment. And when there is the full realization that there is nothing to be sought, it is already there, hidden by the one thing, that sense of personal doership. And that sense of personal doership is erased by the grace of God. Then that is self-realization.
Can you translate it in German?
I'm sorry?
Ah.
Oh, sure, yes.
Es kommt darauf an, was gesucht wird.
I hope you listen to it.
I did. I did.
Aber was ist, wenn man die Brille gar nicht mehr aufsetzen will?
Das habe ich akustisch.
Was ist, wenn man das Gefühl hat, dass man die Brille nicht möchte? Jetzt in diesem Beispiel.
Yeah. He's asking, what then if one at once has the feeling, I don't want the glasses. I don't want the glasses.
Then he'll stumble and fall. If he needs glasses, he says, I don't want glasses, he'll stumble and fall.
Dann wird er stolpern und hinfallen.
Ramesh, Ramesh, 18 months ago when Papaji died, although I was very connected, I felt really, my heart exploded with Papaji. And yet, shortly afterwards, there was a very strong urge to find a teacher. And nobody could believe it, but I had to find a teacher. So I came to Bombay to check out a few teachers. I'd heard of you, and I came, and after the first 3 days, I went to see Maharaj. I went to see Ranjit. And I sat with Ranjit, and I felt very present. And at the end of that, I realised that I didn't need to be there because I had nothing left to look for, and that somehow in those 3 days with you, that driving, that seeking had actually somehow disappeared. So this is why I'm bringing it up after this question now. I felt I had nothing left really to look for. I'd found this connection with you. I was totally fulfilled. And I stayed for a month with you, and I thought I would stay there forever, but of course life took me on and other things have happened since. Twice I have come, even to come here with you this time. It's not that I needed to come, but life has brought me to you, and yet there's still an ego there. There's still an identification with doing, but I don't feel I need anything. So therefore I'm bringing this up because it doesn't feel like I'm seeking. I'm not dissatisfied, I feel fulfilled. But yet I'm cooking and ego is still there. And
what you are saying, I think, is that the intellectual understanding is there. But the process of the intellectual understanding going deeper is happening. How long it will happen? In your control.
I really don't care about enlightenment.
I
just don't care. I'm annoyed when, there's so much wanting of that in the questions. I just don't care.
Yes. That's what the book Who Cares is all about.
And yet the ego is still wanting recognition, is still playing games, is still feeling insecure, And another thing that's happened is there is no resistance to feeling anything. In the emotional, in the feeling level. There is no interference with what is happening. I think the biggest resistance that is there is actually not to pain anymore, but to love.
So the recurrence of the ego and the feeling, the personal wanting, recognition and fame or whatever, is part of the flip-flop that is happening. As the intellectual understanding is going deeper, as I told you, flip-flops are bound to happen, you see. So all that has to happen before the final understanding is, the flip-flops are part of the system, is part of the way the intellectual understanding is supposed to go, you see. And so with that understanding, the flip-flops happen. The flip-flops are also accepted. The flip-flops are accepted as part of the functioning of the ego. That means the ego is accepted.
The ego is?
Accepted. That the ego
just
is there.
Starting to happen.
You see, and what you want is that ego not to be there.
Well, the ego wants to be enlightened, and then I just saw how ludicrous it was actually in the last
So
few days.
therefore the ego is still there. And if the ego gets ignored by the grace of God and the destiny of this body-mind organism, if the ego gradually is accepted, the acceptance means weakening the ego. The more you accept the ego, the weaker it gets. The more you accept the flip-flops, the more you accept the ego. So the more easily acceptance of the flip-flops happens, the deeper the understanding goes. The real word is happening. The more the acceptance of the flip-flops happens, the more there is an acceptance of the ego. The ego feeds on resistance. The ego feeds on resistance. When the ego does not get resistance, when the ego gets accepted, the ego gets weaker. You see?
It feels like it's just come out of hiding in the last few days, actually. Somehow a disguise has. I'm seeing a lot of ego instead of,
You see, now that is the real basis of the uniqueness of this teaching, which is based on Ramana Maharshi's teaching. The uniqueness lies in this. I called it a sadhana to give it a label which may be acceptable to people. This investigation of who am I? Who is this me who doesn't do any action? Which is the further actual application, practical application of Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry. Now, the uniqueness lies in this. Both any kind of sadhana has to be done by the ego. So, someone asked me, who does this investigation? Of course, the ego. It is the ego who has to investigate actions which happen through that body, mind, organism, which the ego has been saying is my action. That is the investigation done by the ego. And as from practical experience, day after day, the ego comes to the conclusion that no action can I truly call mine. Then the ego gets weaker and weaker. If no action is my action, who is this me? And this question makes the ego, day after day, weaker and weaker. On the other hand, a sadhana which tells you, you meditate for 2 hours, makes you feel good. So the mind intellect, the ego says, if I meditate for 4 hours, it should be better. And if I meditate for 14 hours, it should be wonderful. And as I mentioned, sometime when I was at the Hollywood, the very first series, someone asked me, you see, what about meditation? So I said, what about it? Is it good? So I said, sure, it's good. So he said, do you know how long I meditate? So I said, no, sir. And he said, 14 or 16 hours a day. So I said, wonderful. And he was happy. The ego was satisfied with getting a certificate that what the ego was doing was wonderful. And that is what happens in that kind of sadhana, which the ego gets fed into being stronger and stronger. And of course, this gentleman, I didn't have to ask him what he does for a living. If you are able to meditate 14 hours a day, obviously God must have provided you with a living where you don't have to work. Now, meditation is one thing. Now, repeating God's name, technically called japa or mantra. So, there is an ashram in the south of India where to this day, happening when the Guru was there, at the end of the day, a person sits there at a desk, and each person attached to the ashram queues up, comes in a line and says how many times the japa was repeated. And someone takes a note, adds it up for the day. You see. And ultimately what happens, I don't know. But the ego is said, I have done 500,000 times today. Last month, I was able to give only 300,000. So I must be getting closer to self-realization. The ego gets stronger. So the uniqueness of what Ramana Maharshi called the direct method is this. In the direct method of Ramana Maharshi, the ego gets weaker and weaker from personal investigation. In the usual sadhana, the danger is, I'm not saying it happens every time, but the danger is that the ego prides itself on the discipline or whatever it's called and gets stronger and stronger. That is the difference. That is the uniqueness of the direct method which Ramana Maharshi calls self-inquiry. Mark, do you think you can translate this for those who might want?
I feel that was too much for this. Reproduce it.
Indrani?
Of course, thanks very much. This is the fifth day
Yes.
that I have been here.
Yes.
And I have noticed that my thinking has become quieter.
Yes.
And I think it was the second day you had suggested to personally investigate
Yes.
the input. Well, and I said I would let you know how I had got on.
Yes.
Well,
I remember.
I would like to
Make a report?
yes. This morning,
Yes.
I was sitting with a friend in the garden,
Yes.
and we were quietly talking over about the input.
Yes.
And after some time, with the help of my friend, it dawned on me that what you have been saying, there is only one consciousness, filled me. I am agreeing.
Is there a question?
Well, yes, the question is
Yes.
that I agree with you.
Oh, that's not a question. So tell me, is that investigation working?
Yes.
Yeah, indeed.
And it is such a tremendous thing that it burns within.
Yes.
And that I have no idea how to take it except to know that it is thy will be done.
You see that? Yes.
No, you carry on.
You see, the thinking that you said, is getting less. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Now, the thinking that is getting less is, I would conceptualize as the happening of the investigation. In other words, unconsciously, the ego, the thinker, has been asking itself, who is doing the thinking?
That's right.
Is there a thinker? Who is doing the thinking? So the investigation, the result of the investigation is that there is no thinker, no doer, no thinker, no seeker. The result is, therefore, a certain quietness of mind. And that quietness of mind means less thinking.
Yes.
So that there is no thinker is the result of the investigation. And the result of the investigation could take, as I said, day after day. Some 2 months ago, there was a visitor who came for 10 days and was here for 3 months and was thinking of renting a flat so that he could be there for another 6 months. He is at one time a famous singer who is now a monk in a Zen monastery. And the effect of this has been so important for him that the transformation was visible to others. And when we are talking about this investigation, he said a remarkable thing. He said, "Do you know, Ramesh," he said, "I started this investigation. At the end of the day, the very first day, I sat there, action after action came to my mind, which I thought was my action. Many actions. This is the very first day. Many actions came to my mind, simplest as well as the... And I had to come to the conclusion that no action was my action.
Yeah.
And my suggestion was, at the end of the day, sit back and investigate." And he came out saying, "Ramesh, a curious thing happened." He said, the very second day, not even the third day, the very second day, I did not have to wait till the end of the day. As the action happened, the unconscious investigation began, and as the action happened, as the action concluded, before another action or thought could come, there was this conviction, that was not my action. You see? So he says, even the very second day, he's talking of his experience. In his case, probably because of the discipline of several years of this Zen tradition. Whatever it was, in his case, he said, the investigation lasted only for a day. The very next day, the investigation came to a conclusion. That was in his case. Therefore, my point is, any sadhana done earlier, my point is, it is rarely wasted. It is part of the passage. It is part of the progress. I had a guru for 20 years before I went to Nisargadatta Maharaj. He also talked about non-duality. But in his case, I mean genuine, absolutely sincere, I'm not doubting that. But in his case, his ultimate understanding was that his life was being dictated by his guru. So he started building an ashram. He told a few of us, he said, "My guru has asked me to build an ashram where people could come, spend 3, 4, 5 days of their holidays and would have a place to stay and they would be fed. So I want to establish an ashram like that." So that was his guru's order. So there was the traditional Indian guru, where he didn't take me on as a disciple until he was satisfied that I was fit to be his disciple. That was and there was a traditional formal ceremony of initiation. And at that time, my seeking was so intense that I distinctly remember when I sat before him and the initiation ceremony was in progress, I began to weep uncontrollably. While the ceremony was going on. And at the end of it, I think even he was impressed, let me say. So he said, he kept saying, it will happen, don't worry, it will happen. But the shedding of tears was finished at that stage. When I went to Nisargadatta Maharaj and was truly impacted, there were no tears. So, but this Guru was the traditional Indian Guru. The traditional Indian Guru who, when he takes on the responsibility of accepting and initiating a disciple, he takes on the responsibility for his whole life. That is the traditional Indian Guru. He takes on the responsibility for your entire life. So the disciple goes to the Guru and tells him, and that's what happened. My wife is ill. So he would say, all right, tell your wife to fast on Thursdays. Go to such and such a temple on Tuesdays and take such and such a medicine. So that was part of his understanding as a Guru. Someone would say, my son has lost his job. There would be a prescription. Same thing. You do this japa at least 1,000 times a day. You fast on such and such a day. Go to the temple and say, ask him to go to the temple. So there was a prescription. And then, mind you, he would inquire after them. If they were from out of place, he would write. So the traditional Indian Guru accepted the responsibility for the life of the disciple. And my firmest possible conviction, ever since I can remember, is that my life has already been chalked out. No power on earth can change it. How much physical pain I am supposed to bear, how much psychological pain I have to bear, how much pleasure I am going to have, is all decided. That was my firm conviction. Therefore, quite frankly, I didn't need my Guru to ensure my promotions. So to that extent, very soon I came to the conclusion that while the teaching, theoretical teaching is wonderful, I benefited an extreme lot from it, I had not finally found my Guru. But as it is the nature of this body-mind organism, I didn't cut off the relationship. It went on for 20 years. And ultimately I realized why I was destined to carry on for 20 years. Because it so turned out that people who had encouraged him to build the ashram and promised him financial help, especially two of them, I remember. Oh, we know a lot of influential people. We'll get you all the money you need. Go ahead and borrow it now from disciples on no interest basis, and we'll repay it. So the poor old Guru, depending on them, borrowed a lot of money from disciples who themselves needed money on the understanding that it would be repaid within 1 year or 2 years without any interest. So the disciples could afford to give up the interest, but they needed the money. They were middle-class family men. And then these two people come and say, I'm very sorry, we have failed. And my Guru was in a terrible financial situation. Then somehow it was the destiny of this body-mind organism to find out a way to get him out of the difficult situation. And to the end of his day, whenever he met me, he would remember and even say, I don't know what I would have done if you were not there when the ashram was being built. with tears in his eyes. So, I continued for 20 years because I was supposed to continue for 20 years, because I was supposed to bring help to my Guru when he needed it. But that is another matter. What I am saying is, I knew within a very short time that he was not my real Guru. When I went to Nisargadatta Maharaj, the very first day, I said, I am home. The knowledge was, now I am home. You see? So, that's how it happens.
Thank you.
Ramesh, I have a question. The saying, thy will be done,
Yes.
or
Yes.
according to God's will.
Yes.
Who is that God?
This God is the source from which everything has come about. So consciousness is all there is. So the first basic concept is consciousness at rest is all there is. And the consciousness in movement has brought about this manifestation and its functioning, which we call life, or in Buddha's words, samsara. You see? So first there is nirvana or consciousness at rest, and then there is samsara. So the teaching has been, samsara is not real, only nirvana is real, only consciousness at rest is real. But Buddha himself said, there was no question of his. He said, samsara and nirvana are not two. Nirvana is samsara and samsara is nirvana. Consciousness at rest and consciousness in movement are not two. So, this manifestation is an illusion. Sure, it's an illusion. But what does the illusion depend upon? On consciousness. Therefore, is this manifestation and its functioning, is this life that goes on in which we are immersed, real or unreal? It is both real and unreal. It is unreal to the extent that it does not exist by itself. For life to go on, the movie to go on, it depends on the screen of consciousness. So the screen is real and the movie is unreal. But when the movie is going on, the screen and the movie are not two. Therefore, this illusion, if you think it's an illusion and somebody tells you it's an illusion, forget it. He said, if I have a pain in the tooth, what do you mean forget it? It's real, it hurts me. You see? So, this illusion is real. And to that extent, we can forget nirvana. We can forget consciousness at rest, and we have to deal with consciousness in movement. And in consciousness in movement, the truth is, I am. Not I am Jane or John. So, as far as the truth is concerned, we have to deal with truth in life as we know it. Consciousness at rest, you can forget it. That's what you will be when you are dead. But until you are dead, when you are living, life is real. And in that real life, the basic concept is, thy will be done. Which is to say, whatever happens is not in my control or your control. That can only happen according to the will of God. You see? So this basic concept is in this illusory life. But that is what we are concerned with. And in this illusory life, the seeker also says, how can I get rid of the sense of, or get rid of misery? And the misery is based on the sense of personal doership. Therefore, we come down to the level, beginning with thy will be done, the sense of doership has to go. And the sense of doership will go only if it is God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. But to repeat Ramana Maharshi's words, that you are a seeker is itself God's grace. That your head is in the tiger's mouth is itself God's grace. So the seeking is happening, and the seeker has reached a stage where he has come to the conclusion, yes, I accept that the sense of doership has to go. So the seeker, the ego, says, how can I get rid of the sense of personal doership? And the ego is told, you are the sense of personal doership. You are the one who thinks he is the doer. Any action that happens is your action. That's what you think. So you have to find out from personal investigation of your own life, from personal experience, whether any action that happens is your action or it is not your action. The mind intellect says, if it is not my action, whose action is it? Just to satisfy the mind intellect, I say, it is not your action, it is God's action. But basically, what I would tell him is, what the hell do you care whose will it is? The basic relevant point, it is not your will. You have no control over your life. You are not doing what you think is your action. Who does it is irrelevant. So the basic concentrated attention is not who is the doer of my actions, but is any action my action? And then from investigation, when you come from personal experience, when you come to the conclusion that no action has been my action, then the final question arises. If no action is my action, who is this me? Is there a me at all? See, and if it is God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism, the answer finally comes. There never has been a me. There never has been a doer. Doing happens. Deeds are done, but there never is a personal doer. And the total acceptance of it, total unconditional acceptance of the fact that doing happens through every body-mind organism, through energy functioning through each of the body-mind organisms according to the programming. Exactly like electricity functions through every electrical gadget, producing that which each individual electrical gadget is designed to produce. When that final understanding happens, there is relief. Relief from what? Relief from responsibility, which means relief from guilt. That's why on the very first day, I said, you cannot commit a sin because you do not do any action. Who is this who? You, who cannot do any action and is still said to be, you are born in sin. That's one religion. The Hindu religion, every step you take, you commit 1,000 sins. Who commits what sins? That is why if the basic concept is always remains in mind, thy will be done. That means I am not the doer. Therefore, I can feel neither pride nor guilt for any action which happens through this body-mind organism, and I cannot feel hate or envy for anyone else because there is no one else. Whatever the action through any other body-mind does has on this body-mind organism, there is no one. Whatever happens to this body-mind organism, because of an action happening through any other body-mind organism, is the destiny of this body-mind organism. No one else is concerned. That is why I say, no one has the power to hurt you. If you are hurt, That was the destiny of that body-mind organism and the will of God that you will be hurt. No one else can hurt you. No one has the power to hurt you.
Thank you very much for everything.
You're most welcome. I hope you have got your money's worth.
Ramesh?
Yes, please.
I feel that at this point for me it's very important to understand the polarity of good and evil. And I feel this is related to the polarity you mentioned earlier, accepting samsara and nirvana.
Yes.
Are they related and
are one, not related?
I'm sorry, the two polarities I meant.
So they are not two to be related. They are one. Just as you sitting there and you standing up and you walking away and you lying down are not four different people. It is the same body-mind organism. You see? So samsara and nirvana are not two. That is one of the basic teachings of Lord Buddha, which is often forgotten.
And in manifestation, is that accepting good and evil?
I'm sorry, I did.
Accepting good and evil.
Yes.
In manifestation.
Yes. Accepting good and evil. That is what happens in the case of a sage. The sage knows that the body-mind organism called Mother Teresa, which was alive until last year, was programmed in such a way that only good deeds happen. So the happening of the good deeds through a body-mind organism called Mother Teresa was God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. Consequences of those good deeds, Nobel Prize, awards, rewards, fame, all that was also the destiny of the same body-mind organism. That is the good. Now the evil. You have a psychopathic organism, so programmed that only evil, perverted deeds happen. So the happening of those evil, perverted deeds is the destiny of that body-mind organism called a psychopath. And the consequences are also the destiny of the same body-mind organism. That is, being executed or put in a jail or put in an asylum. And my basic point is, both organisms were created by the same source as part of the duality of manifestation. The polarity, interconnected duality of manifestation. That is the difference between the sage and an ordinary man. The sage accepts the duality as the basis of life. The ordinary man chooses between them, chooses between the opposites, and becomes unhappy. So in other words, again my concept, the sage lives in duality. The ordinary man lives in dualism. Dualism means choosing. Duality means accepting duality. That's how it is. You see? So that is the basis. Duality is the basis of manifestation and its functioning.
Thank you.
Ramesh, would you please go into vertical input of thought from source versus horizontal thinking?
For instance?
Versus against our horizontal thinking. Vertical input.
You want me to explain the concept of vertical and horizontal?
Right.
I see. Now, you see, the vertical, a thought which comes. You didn't create the thought. The thought is in the moment. A thought is in the moment, which is the input in this programmed computer. The brain reacts to that input, and then output happens. You see something, that is the input. The brain reacts to what is seen, and there is an output. Or you hear something, again there is an input and an output. What my point is, what you see or what you hear or a thought that comes is in the moment. Is in the moment. The reaction of the brain is also in the moment. So if three people see the same event, see the same scene, but are programmed differently. So what is seen, the output in one case may be anger. The output in another case may be compassion. The output in the third case may be fear. See something, a handicapped man, a beggar, fear may arise if that is the way it's programmed. What if I were in that position? So anger may arise, compassion may arise, fear may arise. That is the natural output. Subsequently, the ego gets involved with that natural reaction. The ego reacts to that natural reaction, and that is in horizontal time. The reaction of the ego, and that is exactly what is absent in the case of sage. If this happens in the case of three sages, anger arises, compassion arises, or fear arises, then that what is arisen is merely witnessed, and that may take its course. The anger may take its course, compassion may take its course in trying to help if you can. Fear may arise, just the thought that what if I had been there? And that will be accompanied almost with a sense of gratitude to that power which did not put you in that position. But in the case of an ordinary person, the anger, there is a reaction of the ego to the anger or compassion or fear. Anger arises, and the ego says, I should not have got angry. My doctor has told me if I get angry very often, my blood pressure will rise. And I will get a heart attack or something else. That is the involvement in horizontal time. The compassion arises. The ordinary man gives some money to somebody. So far it's a reaction, natural reaction. The ego comes in, reacts to that and says, I am a compassionate, kind man. I hope God makes a note of it. Fear arises. The ordinary man reacts to it and says, I have always been this, a timid man. I don't like it. I want to be brave like my friend. That is a reaction of the ego in horizontal time. See?
Thank you, Ramesh.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes, please.
Yes. Ramesh, how did you come to the conclusion that everything is already laid out, and how could I investigate that?
How did I come to the conclusion? Very simple. I've told you, if there is any question, any problem, go to the source and you'll get the answer. How did I come to the conclusion? Because it was God's will.
Or maybe I ask the question the other way, how can I come to the conclusion?
Very simple. You can only come to that conclusion if it is God's will and the destiny of this body-mind organism. Otherwise, you may bash your head against the wall 1,000 times. All that will have is the hurt your forehead.
Give me one more try.
Mind you, at the same time I would say, it does not prevent you from trying whatever you think you should try. If you think you should try some therapy, do it. Or decide to do it. Whether the doing happens or not is again not in your control. You can decide to take up such and such a therapy. Whether you will actually do it or not, you just have to wait and see.
Now, when I saw you in Bombay, you told me I can investigate that my thoughts are not my own thoughts.
Yes.
My doing is not my own doing. This was, I could investigate to an acceptable point. What I can't investigate is that everything is laid out and everything already had happened.
That you cannot investigate. All you can investigate is from personal experience. Don't forget. What is my investigation based on? Your personal experience. From personal experience, the ego investigates any action that has happened. Was it my action? That is the investigation. Not investigation of how the world came into being.
Of how?
The world came into being. That the scientist does. And the scientist can only tell you how the world came into being. The scientist cannot tell you why. Because the scientist cannot know the will of God. He can only tell you the mechanics of it. He can only tell you this is electricity. What exactly is electricity, I don't think any scientist is able to say. There is electricity as part of what is. What it is an aspect of consciousness, is an aspect of energy. So the only investigation I'm referring to is the investigation of any action that has happened through this body-mind organism, and to find out whether that action, from personal experience, whether that action was your action or did it just happen, over which you had no control. That is the only investigation I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Ramesh, I've heard you.
So the authorities did give you permission to do the video?
Yes, thank you.
Your Marcus?
Robert,
yes.
Yes. I hear you say to people, choose, decide. There's one practice that you can do.
No.
No.
What I say is, you have the free will to decide to do what you like. You have the free will to do what you think you should do. You have the free will to make a decision. Now, that includes the free will not to make a decision, if that is what you are referring to.
It's not so much a matter of free will, I understand that. There seems to be just a confusion about the doership part.
Yes.
You say, let God do his job. And I understand from your teaching, there is no doer. I can't let God do. God will do his job whether I let him or not. And so there seems to be some implied doing. Let God is some kind of doing.
Making a decision is the free will. So people are saying, do I have free will? I said, yes, certainly. You have the free will to make a decision. But what is that decision based on? That decision is based on your programming, your conditioning. If that is so, then what is the value of that free will, which makes you decide exactly what you are supposed to decide by God through the programming? That is my point. You question, do I not have free will? Yes, you have. The free will is to make a decision. Now, what is the value of that free will? You find out. And you will come to the conclusion, as I say, that free will is useless, it's counterfeit. I agree. But you do have the free will to make a decision. Whether the decision comes or not is another matter. Therefore, the doing is truly not in your control. You see, there is a story about it. A man was wandering along the top of a mountain. He slipped and fell, and he got hold of the edge. You know the story, you have come to Bombay, but for the sake of others. So he was hanging there for a while. So he shouted, "Is there anyone up there?" Shouted 3 or 4 times, "Please, I need help. Is there anyone up there?" So the voice came, "Yes, but you must do exactly what I say. I'll do anything you say. Let go of the grip." 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then he said, "Is there anyone else up there?" The doing is not in your control. Letting go is also not in your control. Please. All right, go ahead. Okay. It's in your hands, so you...
I have 2 questions. The first question is, you talked about consciousness and rest.
Yes.
And there is somehow, this question came up, whether I can I see the consciousness in rest, or is there a possibility to be it or to feel it when I come more and more?
This consciousness that you are talking of is all there is, isn't it? My basic concept is, consciousness is all there is. So who wants to see this consciousness? Consciousness is all there is. And the one who wants to know what consciousness is or see consciousness is a created object which has been infused by divine hypnosis with a sense of thinkership or doership. So this body-mind object which has been infused with this feeling of I am the thinker wants to see consciousness. A created object cannot ever see or know the creator's subject. Seeing something is a subject-object relationship. You see something, that something which you see is the object, and you who see it are the subject. So seeing or knowing anything is a matter of subject-object relationship. Here is pure subjectivity, which an object wants to know, which is impossible.
So I can see the consciousness in action, and the consciousness in rest I can see because I'm...
You are an object which is part of the totality of manifestation, which has emerged from consciousness. You are one species of object called the human object, which, along with thousands of other species of objects on land, sea and air, on land, water and air, which together make the totality of manifestation. And that one object, in one species of object, wants to know. Wants to know the one subject of pure subjectivity. the will of the pure subjectivity. How is it possible? Yes, I agree. You can only heave a sigh of relief, I would say, not frustration.
The second question I have is somehow I'm also here for a few days, and somehow again and again this thinking comes, and this really wanting to figure it out whether I'm the doer or I'm not. And
yes.
I have the feeling that again and again when I go on the thoughts, or even when it gets more narrow and sticky, and I can't figure it out. Also with this investigation I tried it, and somehow it gets always narrow and it's not fulfilling. And I have the feeling when I'm with me or just think or just be, it's so much more fulfilling, and some things or maybe some understanding bubbled up from itself.
So
and I have the fear that, so I don't know which direction. The one direction is much more fulfilling, but I think
it's extraordinarily simple. If you can just be, you don't need investigation. Investigation is needed only because you're not able to just be. But if you say if you are able to just be,
not all the time, but it's much more.
So
it's much more fulfilling.
My investigation refers to that time when you are not able to be. While you laugh, would you like to give it to someone else?
So Ramesh, we can say that all thoughts are God's thoughts.
I'm sorry?
Can we say that all thoughts
are
God's thoughts?
Yes, indeed.
And that
but not the thinking.
Yeah, so the forgetting of that.
So what leads to horizontal thinking in time is one thought, which is God's thought. Yes.
And the forgetting of that is the ego.
How do you mean?
Because
forgetting
that all thoughts are God's thoughts.
Yes.
Or not being able to see that.
Yes.
Is involvement.
No. Not being able to see it is God's will and the destiny of this body, mind, organism. Not being able to see it at this moment is the will of God and the destiny of this body, mind, organism. So if it is God's will and the destiny of this body, mind, to be able to see it tomorrow, it will happen tomorrow.
What you're talking about is cutting off the involvement.
Yes, but that involvement is not in your control. So the cutting off of the involvement is the understanding in action. What cuts off the involvement? It is the understanding in action which cuts off the involvement. And as I said, as the understanding goes deeper, the cutting off of the involvement becomes quicker and quicker in a scale of 0 to 10. As the understanding goes deeper, the understanding produces this cutting off earlier and quicker and quicker. And that is not in your control.
I see that. Can you say that the involvement itself is the ego?
In ego, you're quite right. You're quite right. Involvement is the ego, is right, yes.
Right. So with no involvement, there is no ego as such.
So if the ego is, you see, when the ego is demolished, because it is the will of God and the destiny, then there is no involvement. The ego is the involvement, I quite agree. So if the ego gets demolished because it is the will of God, no more involvement.